Hi everyone, so welcome to 18th October. Hello, hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching this lecture. So first of all, thank you very much for the response which you showed for the 17th October video, and we'll make sure that we'll continue with this series, and we'll try as much as we can help you with the Hindu newspaper analysis and the related articles, be it from different newspapers. So the extra mile is the something which we'll call when we would be covering those extra articles which will definitely help you in the newspaper analysis. So my name is Sanjay Kumar. I am Current Affairs and Internal Security faculty at Insight IS. Rest about me is written on the slide. You can take your time and read it. And let's come to today's important news. So first of all, Israel confirms eliminating Yahya Sinwar, the dreaded terrorist as per Israel, who was the mastermind behind the 7th October 2023 attack on Israel soil. Then we have two important news which are coming from Supreme Court. First is related to the Section 6A, that is Section 6A of Citizenship Act, which has been validated by the Supreme Court. And the next important news which is coming from Supreme Court is related to it questions the marital rape exceptions in the penal law, specifically when the government has said that if we make marital rape as a crime, it will disturb the conjugal relationship of marriage. Then we have ICT issues arrest warrants against Sheikh Hasina. So this is International Criminal Tribunal, and who would have thought that this same tribunal was established by Sheikh Hasina in 2010, and now it is asking for warrants, or rather it is releasing warrants against same Sheikh Hasina who had established it specifically for the crimes during the Bangladesh Independence War. Then we have Nawaz Sharif calls for renewed India-Pakistan relations, specifically after the visit of External Affairs Minister during the SCO summit. See, you can always talk about this great bond, harmony and great relationship, but until Pakistan stops being the sponsor of terrorism, I don't think so, or rather most of the people in the government or the top heads don't think so the buck will move. And finally, we have an editorial on India's progress in sustainable development goals 2020 for 2015 to 2030 and human development challenges, and where do we stand on human development index. So these are the major news which we would be covering today. So let's start with Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar killed in Gaza, Israel military. Then Hamas chief Yahya Sinwar, architect of 7th October attack, killed in Gaza, Israel. So in newspaper sometimes happens that news related to a particular subject has been covered in different parts of the newspaper. So in our analysis, we'll combine those articles at one place so that it's very easy for you to read, and eventually you'll get the PDF to understand also. So these are two news which came. First news is on the front page, and then the Hamas chief, this is on the international news page. So I've combined it, and I'll give you the analysis related to this. So on 17th October 2024, Israel Foreign Minister Katz has confirmed that Yahya Sinwar has been killed, he has been eliminated. Now he was the most wanted man for Israel, because it is because of him that the entire war against Gaza, against Hezbollah, against Hamas, against Iran has started. Because it was this person who had actually planned the 7th October 2023 attack, in which number of Israelis were killed and many are still hostage. They are still hostage under the Hamas, and they are probably kept some places in Gaza or some underground tunnels. So Sinwar was the key architect of 7th October 2023 attack, and Israel Defense Forces used to say he is a dead man walking. He's a dead man walking because they said that he would be eliminated by Israel Defense Forces, Mossad, or eventually by Israel, and that is why the title of a dead man walking was given to him. So his death represents a significant blow to Hamas leadership. If you are following this news, Hania, who was the top boss of Hamas, has already been eliminated. Mohammed Deif, who was the military head of Hamas, has already been eliminated. Now he was the last cog which had to be eliminated, deleted, and Israel has been able to finally eliminate him, and that's a great victory from the point of view of Israel Defense Forces and Israel. Now the question which comes, will killing of Yahya Sinwar eventually moves towards peace or eventually move towards ceasefire, that is something only Benjamin Netanyahu knows. Because once this person has been killed, the number of rocket attacks from Hamas will also increase. Because same is the thing which we are seeing in Hezbollah also. In Hezbollah, after killing of Hassan Nasrallah, everyone thought that Hezbollah would be eventually destroyed, but number of rocket attacks from Hezbollah has attacked. Though a ground offensive has been launched by Israel, but this ground offensive will take a lot of time. In February, digressing from the topic, I'll give you an example. In February 2022, when Russia started their attack on Ukraine, everybody thought, most of the experts, military experts said that within 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, this entire operation of Russia would be over. Now we are sitting in 2024, more than 2 years have passed, Russian operation is still going on. Obviously Ukraine had the help from Americans and Europeans for the best of the weapons, and aids and everything came. So again, same is the case that the operation ground offensive, talking about ground offensive and winning the ground offensive is a very different thing. If you go and read in the history, in 2006 also a ground offensive was launched by Israel against the Hezbollah. That is, Hezbollah is towards the southern part of Lebanon and northern part towards the Israel. But again, in that 2006 operation, Hezbollah says that they were the victors and Israel said that they were the victors. But eventually this ground offensive is going on, and I don't know how much time this will take, and eventually killing of Yahya Sinwar only complicates the situation. Though Israelis are telling that killing of him, eventually they would be able to get all the hostages back. But what would be the new leadership of Hamas, that would be finally deciding the fate of this war. Until and unless there are three major, there are three major H which we need to understand. H plus H plus H. One H stands for Hamas, one H stands for Hezbollah, and other H stands for Houthis. So Hamas is in Gaza, Houthis is in Yemen, and then your Hezbollah is in southern part of Lebanon. And these three basically come under the axis of resistance, which is the organization which holds these three groups. So they are kind of puppet military or puppet terrorist group, whatever you want to call them, under Iran. So if until unless the relationship between Israel and Iran prospers or develops, or if the relationship improves, till that time happens that the relationship between Israel and Iran improves, these three organizations, if you cut one head, one more will arise. This is a dialogue you must have seen in one of the Avengers movie, that you cut one head, one more head will come. So same thing is happening here, that if you kill one leader, one more new leader will come. So to eliminate these organizations, it is very important either you talk to Iran about this, or force them, the country or the supreme there, Khamenei, that they eventually eliminate these organizations. Otherwise, killing one head, the other head will come. It is something like that. We have been able to curtail militancy in Jammu and Kashmir, but we cannot say that the entire militancy has been removed, because the problem is that sponsoring terrorism is a very cheaper warfare compared to do a proper war, which happened, we can take the examples of 47-48 between India and Pakistan, 65-71, and eventually the 1999 Kargil conflict, because in this a lot of money is involved. That is why Pakistan has gone for bleed India through 1,000 cuts, and the same is the strategy which is being adopted here. I'll also give you one example. If you've heard of stone pelting, which was done in Jammu and Kashmir, the idea of stone pelting came from Israel-Palestine conflict. So they used to have something called intifada, in which they used to take these stones and started throwing towards the Israeli police and military forces. This is the same concept which was borrowed from the Israel-Palestine conflict, and this stone pelting concept was eventually introduced in Jammu and Kashmir. So anyways, this is the news, and I've covered most of the pointers for you. See, October 7, 2023 attack, he was behind it, and the reason he was behind it was because Yahya Sinwar thought that the relationship between, if you heard about, I want you to go and read about Abraham Accords, and please put a comment that what do you mean by Abraham Accords, it was between which countries. So Israel did Abraham Accords, and the relationship between Arab and Israel was normalizing. So if this relationship was normalizing, eventually the country which would have been cornered would be Iran. So Iran started using these puppets, and one of the puppet was Hamas, and under Hamas the puppet head was your Yahya Sinwar, and then he made that this dreaded attack happens, and eventually if you see from Abraham Accords to the Gaza war, to the Hamas war, to the Hezbollah war, and to the Houthi war, and to the Israel and Iran, if that war happens, we have moved towards, and this entire area has become destabilized. And even if you were talking about Arab-Israel normalization and Arab-Israel peaceful relationship, now that is sitting in some corner or under the carpet and no one is talking about it. Though currently many of the nations like Saudi, UAE are pushing the Americans and they are asking Americans to push and pressurize Israel to go for a ceasefire and do not attack the oil and nuclear establishments. Statement coming from Netanyahu is that the Netanyahu would be only attacking the military establishments. But again, you cannot trust Netanyahu. He has been continuously saying that he will put a ceasefire and next day an attack happens. Okay, and these are the three people, if starting from this is Muhammad Deif, this is your Nasrallah, and this would be your Hania, Ismail Hania. So Muhammad Deif, Ismail Hania and Nasrallah. Nasrallah belongs to Hezbollah and these two belongs to Hamas. They have been eliminated by Israel. So if anybody of you is interested in reading about intelligence operations, please, two things which I want to tell. You can read about a unit called 8200, 8200. This is the unit which did that massive pager attack and eliminated a lot of people of Hezbollah. It happened some weeks back, and the Chief of Army Staff and Chief of Defense Staff also told that this is one of the most important masterstroke operation in the terms of grey zone warfare, 5GW warfare. So you can read about it, and if you do get time and you are interested in this, you can always read about Mossad and its wonderful operations. So significance of Sinwar's assassination we have already covered. Obviously this has given a huge boost to the idea that is Israel Defense Forces and Israel, and a huge moral and military victory, because this was the arch rival which Israel had to eliminate, and specifically Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, was continuously talking about him. So Sinwar role in Hamas and recent development we have already covered. This implication of Israel-Hamas conflict that is likely to, so I've already covered it, will likely to escalate tension and potential retaliatory measure with Hamas, because same thing which we have seen in Nasrallah killing. So once Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah head was killed, the number of attacks, rocket attacks increased, and the attack from a huge number of rockets and missiles were also fired. Basically missiles were fired, ballistic missiles were fired from Iran side also. So consequences and future prospect, the killing of Sinwar is part of Israel effort to decapitate Hamas leadership. But again I am saying that you cut one head, one more arises, number of heads will start until unless you cripple or you cripple the organization axis of resistance or Iran financial structures which are forcing these organizations to work. So till the time the dialogue starts between Iran and Israel, you keep eliminating, these people will still getting weapons and all sort of logistical support for Iran, and they will continue. It's a great victory for Israel, but again this will lead to a solution. I personally feel, I really doubt it, because Israel has been able to eliminate lot of major militants. If you go back in, they've done wonderful operations in 1972 after the Munich attack they have done. But again, if we need to solve, because Iran is a country, they are a big military power, until unless the conversation does not start between Israel and Iran, it would be tough to find a solution. So next is coming to two important news which have come from Supreme Court. This is the validity approval given to the Section 6A of the Citizenship Act. Everybody, this is a very, very important news from the polity point of view, from UPSC point of view. Section 6A has been thoroughly covered in the Lakshmikant book. If you have that book, please go through it, or whatever notes you are following. It is a very important news from the exam point of view, from prelims point of view, or from mains point of view. Okay, so two citizens, 6A of the Citizenship Act as valid parties hail court verdict on Section 6A of Citizenship Act, and Justice J.B. Pardiwala, the final result came 4:1, 4 judges were agreeing, one judge had a dissent, he was not agreeing, so that was Justice J.B. Pardiwala who was against the Section 6A giving validity by the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court upholds the Section 6A of Citizenship Act as valid law. It was a 4-1 majority decision, and most importantly, Section 6A came after the Assam Accords of 1985. So Assam Accords was a tri-party agreement between the government of Assam. So let me just go to that. Assam Accord signed in 1985 was a tri-party agreement between central government, Assam state government and the leaders of Assam movement aimed at stopping the influx of illegal migrants which were coming from Bangladesh. And this led to the establishment of 6A into the Citizenship Act. So this basically act says that the people who have come before 1st January 1966, they will get the citizenship, and people who have come from 1st January 1966 to 25th March 1971 under certain procedures and law, they can be given the citizenship. So this is what this law was about. Now Assam and some organization and NGO from Assam were contesting, and they were against this because they were saying because of these illegal migrants, the resources of the state have been compromised. The cultural part of Assam people and the people staying there, ethnicity has been destroyed, because they said it's very simple. They said that, for example, if there are there are 100 people and there are 100 people are there in a state and everyone is getting 1 kg of atta, and the total resources is 100 kg of atta. For example, let me just draw this. So 100 kg of atta and 100 people. So everyone is getting 1 kg of atta, everyone is happy. But suddenly, if out of this 10,000 people will come, so you very well know what will happen with this 100 kg of atta. So this is a very very simplistic way of telling you things, that was the intent, and this was the contention of the Assamese, the NGO who are fighting and the organization which are fighting the case in the Supreme Court, that because of this, people who have come from Bangladesh, they are illegal migrants and they are eating the resources of Assam. But on the ruling which has come, and the CGI has said that we have to maintain the principle of fraternity, we have to maintain the principle, we also have to make a balance between humanitarian balance and also the development. So Supreme Court has majorly said, the CGI statement which has come that they are saying that the problem of resources or cultural ethnicity, all these problems basically started after the cut-off date of 25th March 1971, when Pakistan military operations started in Bangladesh. All those people who have come after these dates, those are illegal migrants, and those people should have been removed, or they should have been deported by the state government, and state government did not do the right steps to remove them, and that is the reason that this imbalance has come to the state. So this is the major news which has come. So you need to know about Section 6A of Citizenship Act, and the Supreme Court has also said that the population which came under this from this 1966 to March 25th, 1971 and prior to that, they do not violate the Article 29 Clause 1 also of related to culture. So I hope now you understand this news. Rest, everything related to the articles, the background information, everything has been covered in the PDF PPT which you will get. So if you've understood, the rest you will find everything here. I'll just take you through it again also. So Supreme Court 4:1 Citizenship Act 1955, Section 6A, which allows immigrants from Bangladesh residing in Assam to obtain Indian citizenship. Preambular value of fraternity, or the principle of fraternity, brotherhood, balancing the humanitarian aspect, political resolution from Assam Accord. Assam Accord 1985 we have already covered. It's a tri-party agreement between the central government, state government and the Assam people, and the major part which came out of this agreement was to stop the influx of Bangladeshi migrants, and eventually Section 6A came. Next is key provision, provides a path to citizenship from immigrants from Bangladesh who entered Assam before 1st January 1966, then January 1st 1966 to 25th March 1971. They can secure citizenship under specific conditions and procedures. This I've also covered for you. The Act bars citizenship. That means if you have come after 25th March 1971, then you are not allowed. And why this date was taken? Because after this date, the military operations by the Pakistani side starts on the Bangladeshis, aligning with the historical context of Bangladesh Liberation War. So principle of fraternity and legal reasoning, Justice Suryakant, we need to follow the principle of live and let live. These are certain codes which you can write in your UPSC mains answer, and specifically if the codes have been written from a Supreme Court judge, it will fetch you, better marks. It can give you half a mark, 1 mark more, because your legitimacy and authority of your answer also becomes good. So he has spoken about live and let live. He argued prioritizing community rights, fraternity was necessary over disenfranchising millions. So he's saying that people who have entered before this 25th March 1971. So if you don't give this citizenship, this goes against the principle of live and let live, and this will disenfranchise millions of people. Supreme Court majority concluded that Section 6A aligns with the constitutional principles, not infringing citizenship provisions under Article 6 and Article 7. Then they've also said it is also not infringing, these people who have come, the Article 29 Clause 1 of the Constitution. So implementation and governance, so judgment acknowledged Assam's burden due to, so the judgment also talks about, yes, there's a burden on Assam, but the problem of this burden on Assam specific economically, this is because of the failure of the state government and not because these migrants have come. So it's criticized government's failure to identify, deport post-1971 immigrants, that is after March 25th, 1971, pointing to inadequacies in implementing immigration laws. Court found the mechanisms under the Immigrants Expulsion from Assam Act 1950, Foreigners Act 1946, and that these laws are inadequate, and most importantly, they were not being properly implemented by the state government. And they've also asked about to place the matter before the Chief Justice for the creation of bench to monitor that how are these laws used and how are they being implemented post 1971. So again, Supreme Court will go in detail, and we'll again have a great discussion on what Supreme Court said later once this case comes. Rest Chief Justice part we have already covered. What CGI has said, petition against Section 6A, balancing development, population growth. So Justice Khan talks about immigration and sustainable development can coexist, dismissing the idea that immigration is the only reason which led to that hampers local sustainable development. Now these people who have come from prior to 1966 to 71, March 25th, 1971, they should not be removed. Plus the parliament which is talking about development and assign, and then we are talking about NRC there. This decision corresponds in parallel to the NRC. So what is NRC? Please do mention what is NRC in the comment section also. So I think we have covered this. Rest, Supreme Court holds the validity of Section 6A of Citizenship Act. So this part of in detail I've gone, this part is also I've covered. So once you get the PDF, you can read this. So yes, Justice Pardiwala dissented, and he said that the spirit of Section 6A, part of the Citizenship Act, goes against the development and the cultural rights of the people of Assam, because they have been dismantled because of this illegal migration of population which came from Bangladesh prior to 1966 and or prior to March 25th, 1971. Okay, so next would be Supreme Court questions logic behind exceptions to marital rape in penal law. Now this came in the news, and this was in the news because Government of India, they went to Supreme Court and said that if a marital rape happens, that means a rape done by his husband on his wife, and the wife is not giving the consent for physical intimacy, or she's not giving consent for sexual intercourse or sex, and she has been forced to do it, so this becomes a marital rape. Now the Government of India said that marital rape should not be considered a crime, because this will destroy the conjugal relationship of marriage. This will destroy, or this will eliminate, this will hamper the marriage as a bond. Now Supreme Court is asking, or the petitioners in Supreme Court has asked that if this is continuous, the petitioners are saying a rape is a rape if it is done by a stranger or it is done by a husband, because you must have heard that famous statement in that movie Pink, that no is not a word, no is itself a big sentence, and it is a sentence, and that is where the consent is the most important thing, be in a relationship, be in a marriage or outside the marriage. So again, on October 17, 2024, Supreme Court of India began hearing petitions seeking to criminalize non-consensual sexual acts within marriage as rape. Justice J.V. Pardiwala questioned the logic behind penal laws, which says, now this is a wonderful statement which has been given by the Supreme Court judge. He says, wrongful confinement, criminal intimidation against women, assault of a wife by her husband. These are considered offences. But do not recognize forced sexual intercourse as a crime. Why is this? And this is what the government of India in the next hearing they would have to give the answers, that why are they saying this? Okay. So petitioner's argument in legal issues, petitioner's argument protecting non-consensual sexual acts by husband. So they basically say that either it's a husband or a stranger. In both the cases, when a rape happens, it destroys the bodily integrity, dignity and autonomy or the decision making of the women. And it says that it challenges the exceptions. So two exceptions are already there, specifically related to marital rape. And if Supreme Court gives a decision on marital rape that it should be criminalized, then there should be a precedent which has never been done. And let's see what Supreme Court eventually comes on this. So section 375 of the Indian Penal Code and section 63 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, both of them, they give an exceptions to marital rape. So when the petitioners are questioning, they are basically questioning these two exceptions under the penal law and Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. So exception 2 of section 375 of IPC, section 63 of BNS which recently came, forced intercourse by a husband if the wife is over 18 years old. As per that, this is not a crime. Okay, earlier in which IPC the age was 15 years, in Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita it is 18 years old. So center's position, so this is what is being questioned, that center is saying that criminalizing marital rape could negatively affect conjugal relationship and lead to serious disturbance in the institution of marriage. Now my question to the government and my question to everyone who is watching this video is that a relationship where, what kind of conjugal relationship is that where a husband is forcing himself on the partner which is supposed to be her partner, forcing her physically and doing sexual intercourse? This is not a very what should I say, this is not a very healthy relationship. This is being forced on the women. So if we talk about conjugal relationship, is this a healthy relationship where a husband is raping the women or raping her wife? So that is something which you need to answer, and eventually the Supreme Court and the petitioners will finally get an answer from Supreme Court. The court noted the incongruity in the law, pointed the Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud says that it's a crime. It is a crime if you put any foreign object, heinous acts like inserting a foreign object into women are considered rape. But if this is done by a husband, so if it is done by a stranger, it is considered a rape, but if not committed by the husband. So if the husband is doing it, why this is not considered rape? Obviously the arguments will come from the government side, we'll hear in the coming days. So response from the petitioners, protecting married women from rape, sexual choices and consent, components of autonomy, marriage, we've already covered this, striking down the exception, specifically the IPC exception and Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita exception would be aligned with the constitutional values. The current law grants immunity to husband. Now, if the immunity has been given to the husband, the Supreme Court obviously once it comes with the final judgment, we'll hear what they say from the point of view of husband and from the point of view of women also. So potential changes we'll see to the legal landscape. We have covered this. Now let's go to Bangladesh court issues arrest warrant for Hasina. So who would have thought the same International Crimes Tribunal ICT, which was established by Sheikh Hasina in 2010 against the crimes or the war crimes which were committed during the 1971 liberation war of Bangladesh. Those people who did these crimes against Bangladeshis who were fighting the liberation war, this same ICT would be issuing warrants against Sheikh Hasina. She would have never thought that this would come. So International Criminal Tribunal issues arrest warrants against Sheikh Hasina and 45 others. So International Criminal Tribunal in Bangladesh, originally established by former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in 2010, now issuing warrants against her. And the decision which was taken by the current advisor Muhammad Yunus, who is heading the Bangladesh as of right now, the decision comes from them. And these warrants relate to alleged crime against specifically from July to August 2024 when a lot of people were killed in the protest and processions which were being taken out. So this is the decision which has been taken. And now the problem with India is that India is on a very tight rope when it comes to Sheikh Hasina. It's just a matter of time when the extradition request will come for Sheikh Hasina. I hope that request never comes from the Bangladesh, but eventually they would come with this extradition request, and that would be a very tight rope for India, because in that context, if we give Sheikh Hasina and she gets assassinated, that doesn't go very well for us. And if we'll have to go through the extradition agreements which we have signed between India and Bangladesh and try to find some loophole in that, only the government of India can answer that. But if we don't give, then there might be pressure, because if we don't give, then China and Pakistan will use that angle and say that India is pro Sheikh Hasina and India is against the current incumbent or the current government, or they are against the revolution or the civil unrest which happened through which Muhammad Yunus came and the student unions came. So India is against them. So China and Pakistan can use and get Bangladesh towards this side. Recently only the Bangladesh has spoken about, Muhammad Yunus has spoken that we need to resettle and restart our relationship with Pakistan. They have met counterparts from China and Pakistan. So both ways it would be a tough situation for India. So let's see what happens in the coming days. So these warrants related to alleged crime against humanity committed during the July-August 2024 uprising, which led to the downfall of Hasina government, which was in 16 years in power. Now if you go in the Bangladesh issue, there are multiple things which has happened. If you really read about it, the economic development of Bangladesh under Sheikh Hasina government did really go high. It is basically after the COVID years when the garment industry was hit and the unemployment was increased, and the ruling dispensation under the Sheikh Hasina was following a dictator or authoritative type of rule which was not accepted by students and many other people. Eventually she was thrown out, and rather she left and she came to India. Now you see the growth of BNP, Jamaat-e-Islami. Jamaat-e-Islami is a terror group which works against India. It's a puppet organization under ISI. So moving further, details of tribunal orders to arrest 46 individuals, Sheikh Hasina, and to present them before the court by November 18. As per Chief Prosecutor, arresting these influential individuals is important for a fair investigation. Background and tribunal restructuring. ICT was reconstituted on 14th October 2024 with Justice Mortuza, and things have started there. Expedite the trials related to crime against humanity, against number of cases, more than 150-200 cases has been put against Sheikh Hasina of murder and different charges. Many of these cases are very bogus in nature. There might be some cases which might be actually true, but since Bangladesh, if you see economically, they are in turbulent waters. They don't have, rather they have to pay more than $1 billion in bills for electricity to India, but rather they are focusing on Sheikh Hasina, because this is one issue that the entire people will start focusing on that. Something like what Trudeau is doing. Since Trudeau, we covered the issue of Trudeau. Trudeau was, Trudeau's ratings were decreasing, and then he needed one more issue. He said India, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, he doesn't have a credible proof, the credible evidence. He has openly said on the camera. Similarly, these people are also talking about Sheikh Hasina, because for development they would need help of India, money and various other things. This is the same thing which we saw in Maldives also. Muhammad Muzo, those Instagram reels expectation and reality. In expectation, he was India out, and in reality he came for, he was asking for money and all kind of funds from India. So there was a huge U-turn. So give 6 months to 8 months to Bangladesh, this entire money turmoil and every turmoil which is going in Bangladesh, eventually the relationship between India and Bangladesh should improve. So historical context of ICT, so Sheikh Hasina, this is that 2010 they had established this, and this was against during Bangladesh 1971 War of Independence, the crimes which are committed by the Pakistani army or people who are associated, Jamaat-e-Islami people, and now this same organization, this same code is issuing warrants against Sheikh Hasina. So rest. Coming to, from the article's point of view, the last news for today would be India-Pakistan should move from past Jaishankar visit a beginning. So Pakistan is very happy. Jaishankar came, he shook hands with Sharif, and he had lunch also, and there was, though he spoke about, he did not explicitly mention India and Pakistan and China, but his statement was very clear about the relationship can only involve if there is trust, and obviously need to remove terrorism and CPEC and all those things, trying to with the territorial territory which you have acquired of the CPEC, which is going through the Gilgit-Baltistan, which is basically part, if you see the upper Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan occupied Kashmir, it goes from that part. And then China was asking that why isn't CPEC, why is India not joining CPEC? If India joins CPEC, then we would be giving legitimacy and we would be giving the sovereignty to these countries that this land belongs to you. So with all these problems, it is very difficult that Pakistan might be thinking that that Jaishankar came here and they're talking Bollywood movies and cricket matches and everything can start. That is not going to happen, because there are categorical statements given by Jaishankar that any kind of relationship with Pakistan will only start if the terrorism, the sponsor of terrorism, Pakistan stops these terror groups, dismantles them and destroys them. So he is very hopeful, and because his brother is only the Prime Minister, so he's described the visit as beginning and hoped it would lead to an opening in bilateral relations. So this is good for giving a rhetoric, but it's very difficult this will happen. And Nawaz Sharif has also given statements against that. It was Imran Khan because of whom the relationship between India and Pakistan went sour, because Imran Khan at the UNGA assembly said Modi and RSS, they are like Hitler and Mussolini, they are extremist organization, and because of which the relationship went sour. He also added that I tried to have better relationship talking to Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and then he's saying the Kargil war which happened, that shouldn't have happened because it was against the Lahore spirit. So this is what statement he has given. He's very hopeful that the relationship between India and Pakistan would improve in the coming days. So majorly I've covered, rest all the things are here. Building a different future, a different climate change. He is saying that India should talk to Pakistan about climate change and energy shortage. Pakistan does not have any money, okay. They borrow, it's like they have multiple credit cards. So in a lot of countries, people, when they are not able to give loan, they take one more credit card to give the previous loan. So they borrow money from China to pay to Saudi, then they borrow money from some bank to, recently they have got around $500 or $600 million from Standard Chartered Bank, which country takes from these private banks. So they are getting, so they don't have money. Right now they are going for around 24th or 25th bailout from International Monetary Fund. So for all these things, climate change, energy shortages, Pakistan needs money. Who will be giving them money? The trade between India and Pakistan is short. Please go and read about Tapi gas line. Tapi gas line, so in that Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India gas pipeline. So Turkmenistan has already made the pipeline structures. Pakistan has not even started because they don't have money to make it. So that is also talks about what is happening in Pakistan. So he is expecting that the COP summit which is expected in November, that both leaders might meet. I don't know they will meet or not, but SCO meet was a multilateral summit, and that was the intent. Jaishankar had to go there. So Sharif advocated for restoring cricketing ties, cricketing team and Champions Trophy and whatnot. So let's see what the government of India takes the decision. Criticism of Imran Khan, we've already done that, the speech he gave at the UNGA. Importance of moving beyond the past. Yes, we want to move beyond the past, but you need to eliminate your terrorist organizations, be it Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Hizbul Mujahideen, and people associated with, be it Hafiz Saeed, Maulana Masood Azhar, Sayyid Salahuddin, all these need to be eliminated. You talk about peace, you talk about this, but you're continuously doing terror attacks in Jammu. Rather, your terror attacks in Jammu, in the Poonch, Rajouri, Pir Panjal regions have increased at a very alarming rate, and then you talk. So it is something like that. You're talking about offering as a cake, and at the same time you want to cut our heads with the swords of life. So they continuously to do so, and the Bleed India 2000 cuts. So this is a strategy. At one person is talking about peace, and as in Pakistan, the politicians are never in the power. It's the army. When Nawaz Sharif is talking about Lahore spirit, their army was launching the Kargil war. So the main power in Pakistan is the Pakistani army. Until they decide to dismantle the terror networks or the terror setup they have done, the development or the bond harmony between two nations is very, very difficult. Okay, so they keep saying that India hamara hamsaya hai, they say that India is our neighbor, but you have to behave with the neighbor, right? So anyways, so he said that 75 years between India and Pakistan have been in conflict. Let's see if the next 75 years can be in peace. It's a wonderful thought, but thought to ideology to implementation, and implementation to wonderful results, that's a long way to go. Let's see. that both the government and specifically from the government of Pakistan and their military establishment are able to do something about that. Sharif's role in Pakistan politics, so he is the head of PMLN, and his daughter Mariam, she is the chief minister of the Punjab Pakistan also. So again, significance for bilateral relations we have covered. Let's move towards the editorial. One important editorial, there are multiple editorials. The one which I personally felt which is very important, there is one on universal income also, and one is on the Google also, but this is very important. This is India's SDG focus and its human development issues. Now this is important from the point of view of prelims also and mains also, because a lot of questions from Human Development Index have come in the past. So G20 summit in September 2023 held in New Delhi. Then you had UN SDG summit 18-19, Summit of the Future 2022 to 2023, followed to review the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Prior to Sustainable Development Goals, we used to have MDG, which were from 2000 to 2015. MDG was replaced by SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. There are also called 2030 goals or 2030 targets. The target is that by 2030 it should be achieved. They are very difficult to achieve because we keep, after 2030 some new or different name would be added and the goals will continue. But anyways, in this context it is important to examine that what has been the India's human development, where does India stands in the Indian Human Development Index, and which are the major SDG goals like 3, 5, 8 which are associated with the SDGs. So human development and the SDGs, these are three very important pointers from the prelims point of view, and this has come again and again in the prelims examination. Long and healthy life. So Human Development Index measures three key dimensions: long and healthy life, life expectancy at birth, knowledge that is expected in mean years of schooling, and third is decent standard. And third is decent standard of living, income per capita. So on these three parameters, your HDI is calculated. Now, and the SDGs which are related to the HDI are, so it can be a combination of a prelims question which can come. So SDG 3, SDG 5, SDG 3, 4, 5, 8 and 10 are related to HDI. So what is 3? Good health and well-being. SDG 4, quality education. SDG 5, gender equality. SDG 8, decent work. SDG 10, reduced inequality. We talk about gender inequality and the income inequality in India. If we have an income inequality of around 21%, which is larger than the average of the whole world, larger than the average of Asia, East Asia. So there are a lot of parameters where we are currently lagging as per the report. Countries aiming for sustainable development need to must implement policies that enhance human development. So in India, even in yesterday's lecture I have told you, in India we have multiple organizations, we have multiple schemes, and there are many organizations which are implementing those schemes. Until and unless the accountability of the scheme and the implementation is properly being done, till then the solution will not come. This is the same thing which we saw in that the issue of Section 6A. Now the Supreme Court is saying that after 25th March 1971, you have got 3 laws, but why were those laws not being implemented properly by the state government to stop the influx of illegal migrants? So we have the organization, we have the state government, so it is happening. So it is happening in illegal migrants, and same is the situation, be it security or major parts of the country. The problem with our country is that we have a very reactive approach. Until unless this reactive approach becomes proactive in nature, this will continue. For example, 26/11 attack happens, Mumbai and many parts of Mumbai gets destroyed, terrorists kill many people, then you get National Investigation Agency. It is after a dreaded terror attack or people are killed, then our government wakes up and come up with some new organization, and that organization starts working. So this is something we need to move from reactive approach to proactive approach, and this is what you keep writing in your answers. The point is that government should also implement it. It is happening at many areas, but majority of the country still needs to work upon it. So India's human development performance, if we see HDI 2023 to 2024, India's score is 0.644. Previously it has got dipped also. So we come under medium human development category. Our rank is 134 out of 193 countries, HDI was stagnant at 0.638, then we came down in 0.633 in 2021, and it has improved to 0.644 in 2022. Now you might be thinking this has improved, but if you see our performance, we are behind Bangladesh, which is having a civil unrest, we are behind Bhutan, we are behind China, we are behind many other countries. So if you see Malaysia, Thailand, China, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Bhutan and Bangladesh. For example, okay, China, let's put aside China, let's put aside Malaysia, Thailand also, Sri Lanka, they had economic unrest, they are still reeling under economic unrest, they just got the new president. So how can we be behind Sri Lanka? So economists and other people say that they can be a small country. Yes, they are a small country, so their resources are also less. Our resources are also higher in number. So we need to improve Sri Lanka. Bangladesh, if you see from 1920, they had a huge crisis economically, huge crisis. Their ready-made garment industry has been badly hit during the COVID wars, during the COVID times. But again, Bangladesh is also doing better than us. So 129, their rank is better. India's HDI has increased by 48.4% from zero. So in 1990, we used to be at 0.434. So it used to be something like, we used to be very worse. Now we are only worse. So that cannot be the parameter, right? That you came from very worse to worse. We have to move from very worse to good. For example, in 1970s when Chinese started the development and when China started development, most important thing they started doing was building roads, and that is happening in the last 5-10 years. We see a lot of roads are being made in the country because roads are the most important parameter for the development, and once the road comes, then the commercial establishments come. So 70s, 80s, 90s, what China did as a development in their country, they are reaping their manufacturing sector today, and that is why they are one of the biggest exports hubs of the world. So COVID-19 has significantly impacted dimension of education and income. Gender Development Index says that among the 42 countries in the medium human development category, India is one of the 7 with high gender inequality. You would be surprised the difference between gender inequality we talk. There's a gap of 47.8 percentage point between women and men. So women stand at 28.3%, men stand at 76.7%, and the gap is 47.8 percentage point. So that talks about gender inequality. It is very high in number. Things are improving. They are majorly improving in the rural areas. Urban, it has moved to 20 to 25% the participation of the women. But again, long way to go. Again, in this we see female LFPR rate. So LFPR is labor force participation rate. India is significantly lower. We are lower than China, we are lower than Bhutan, and we are lower than Bangladesh also. Periodic Labor Force Survey PLFS shows that 37% of the female age 50 and above participate in the labor force, which has gone up from 23%. Rural female FPR, it has moved from 24.6 to 41.5%. But in urban, this upward trend is not much. The difference is only the upgradation is only of 5%. So urban female FPR saw a marginal rise of 20.4% to 25.4%. Now labor force participation rate tells you if the women are increasingly working, that will talk about gender parity, and the entire household income will also increase. That is why that women starts working in the jobs, or women participation in labor force is very, very important. It will move towards gender equality and towards gender parity, and this way our HDI index will also improve. Next is rising income inequality. The difference between rich and poor in the country is more than 21.7%. Income inequality India high, as with richest 1% holding 21.7% of the total income. This is even higher than Bangladesh. This is even higher than China, Bhutan and Nepal. Now forget about these countries. We are higher than the world average. So world average inequality stands around 17.5%. What we have is 21.7%. Then we are higher than South Asia average also. Then we are higher than East Asia and Pacific average also. Then we are higher than the Europe average also. Europe and Central Asia average 15.7%. So this tells that the inequality between rich and poor, the inequality is so high. So gender inequality is very high, and then income inequality is very high. Until unless we don't work on these parameters of these SDGs, it's very difficult to improve the HDI. So addressing gender issues and gap rising and rising income inequality is very much crucial. Recommendation for achieving the SDG is boosting human development. I think that is very clear. Boosting human development, gender inequality should be reduced, and income inequality should be reduced. More labor force participation should be increased for women. So policy measures should focus on reducing gender disparities, increasing female labor force participation, addressing income inequality. Effort should also target improving health, education, and livelihood opportunities. So this is one more news why tomato prices are rising. The reason for this is a short news. The reason why this is there, because there is an issue of sowing and unusual high rainfall. These are the two major reasons, and there is a demand and supply gap between the wholesale and the retail prices. Now finally coming to the prelims questions. So with reference to HDI, consider the following statements. So HDI measures three key dimensions: life expectancy, expected mean years of schooling, per capita income. HDI aligns with the SDG, particularly SDG 3 and SDG 8. These are some of them. Particularly according to HDI 2023, India's HDI is placed in low human development category. Now in this, first and second statement are correct, third is wrong because it's not low, it's medium. Rest is given here. Now moving towards the next question. In the context of India's gender development issues, which of the following statements are correct? Gender Development Index highlights disparities in human development between men and women. India's female LFPR is higher than that of Bangladesh but lower than, we know this statement is wrong. The latest periodic labor force survey indicates significant increase in rural female, so that participation has increased. So 1 and 3 statements are correct. So, and the code, and finally before I leave, an important code for you: we must accept finite disappointment, but we never lose infinite hope. So there would be disappointments, there is a 100% chance that you will have failure, disappointment. Accept them. Once you accept them, find out the mistakes. Those mistakes which you are able to find out what are the solutions to them, implement them and improve, and eventually there's always an infinite hope which will lead you to success. Okay, so thank you very much for today. An extra mile article for all those who want to go and read more, that will be the editorial. The Google, this is related to the antitrust laws. Please go and read about it. In the PDF you'll get every notes related to it. This is the extra mile you want to go. This is related to the antitrust laws and how Google is using the Play Store and they are not allowing other payment mechanisms. So thank you very much. Jai Hind and take care.